Welcome to the Conshy Coaching Podcast, where we take the concepts of mindset and energy leadership coaching and make them real so that you can get out of your own way, beat the burnout, and create a life and career that you love. I'm your host, Jenn Masse. Hello, and welcome to the 9th episode of the Conshy Coaching Podcast. Today, I have Lauren Pla joining me. Lauren is a certified energy leadership coach who is passionate about helping individuals raise their energy, awareness, and personal power. Through coaching, Lauren helps her clients trust their inner voice and connect to their deeper purpose, all while unearthing the strength that already lives inside them, which honestly is resilience. Lauren helps her clients cultivate resilience by trusting themselves, connecting to their purpose, and empowering them to stand in their own power. As a quick note, Lauren and I are recording this during the coronavirus mandatory social distancing period, so we apologize in advance if you hear any kids, any husbands, or any other background noises. Lauren, thank you so much for joining me on today's show.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to talk to you. I know we can't be face to face, but this is definitely a treat for me.
Yes, absolutely. And you and I met the second weekend of our coach training, and I feel like we clicked immediately and can talk for hours. So this is going to be a true test for us today to see if we can keep it short. But I'm so incredibly excited to have you on the show. And before we really dive into the topic for today, which is cultivating resilience and our values, I would love for you to introduce yourself further and tell us what you're up to now.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to say I'm up for the task today. I think you and I can do this. I'm going to have faith in us today. So I am Lauren Pla, like you said. I am a certified professional coach. I do specialize in personal empowerment, mindset. It's interesting, my day job is currently working at a fitness facility, a gym. And as you know, with the coronavirus, we are considered non-essential right now. So we are closed down. And it's actually giving me an opportunity to do some more coaching and create some content and some videos and some write-ups and really offer my coaching to our members and even not our members. We're doing a lot of this online and we're just kind of sending it out wherever we can. And first of all, let me say it is an absolute gift, to be in a position where something like this is happening and I still have that gift to give and to have the ability to be able to give it. And so this has been a very enlightening experience for me. And so that's kind of what I'm up to right now. And it's been really amazing.
That's awesome. And I think what's so great when you think about cultivating resilience, and I introduced this on episode 8, but cultivating resilience and being resilient means that after your basic needs are satisfied and you're true to your values, it's understanding what your gifts and talents are and then sharing them with the world to make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're in alignment with your values and you're sharing your talents, there's no reason not to stand in your power and to be resilient because you trust everything that you're doing and you trust that you're living in accordance with your life purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So, episode 8, I talked a lot about fulfilling needs. For anyone listening who has not yet listened to episode 8, after this episode, double back and go listen to that episode because fulfilling your basic needs is step 1. Step 2 is really understanding what are your core values and how are you living a life that is in alignment with those core values? Because whenever your core values are being crossed, it's draining your energy and it's knocking you down a level. And so today, Lauren and I are going to talk about the next step in cultivating resilience, which is understanding and prioritizing your values. And something that I absolutely love about Lauren is that her coaching practice, Conshy Coaching, is based on the Hebrew phrase, "Here I am." And when I personally think about cultivating resilience and cultivating that inner strength, there is nothing more powerful than believing that I exist, I am real, and I am here. And what's so cool about values and Conshy and Here I Am is values are the reason that we are here and values are the reason that we exist.
I'm actually having chills, like even hearing you go through it again. I love this message. And I would actually even take it a step further and say that our values are actually how we exist, right? It's like taking what makes you you and creating that alignment and bringing that out into the world. And the quick story behind Hineni was I was having a crisis of something. I don't know if it was a crisis of faith or just a crisis of not feeling something was missing. That's basically how I can describe it. And the whole I exist, I am real, I am here. When that came to me, it was not only a light bulb of there is something bigger than me that was just letting itself be known, but it was like a smack in the face, like, boom, Lauren, you are powerful. Like just being here, like you are this thing, you exist, you are real, right? You are here. And it just kind of goes back to I am, and I think that our values are our I am. What are you?
Yeah. And you know what? That's so powerful because you and I are both currently in a Cultivating Resilience workshop with Sandra Fumiko with the World Happiness Foundation, which is magical. It's open to anybody. You don't have to be a coach. It's like $32 a year for all of this amazing content. Highly recommend you go check it out. I'll drop it in the episode notes. But in one of the webinars, Sandra was speaking about how our values drive how we behave. So if we don't understand what our values are, then how do we know how to behave? And I think that ties back to what you were saying about like, it's not why we exist. To your point, it's how. It's literally how do we show up? And we show up in accordance with our values.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The thing is, there are, I'm sure, listeners that will be familiar, have heard this before, right? And they think like, what are your values, right? And they'll think, well, I love my family, like I have strong family values, right? That's not quite what you and I are even talking about here, because 99% of the population, hopefully, who have families, have strong family values. They love their families. The values that you and I are talking about, which people don't always really get to explore because they're not given the opportunity or even the suggestion. You kind of go through life thinking, I'm a good person, like I have good values. That's probably true. But what really are those values, right? And if you start thinking about it, what I like to do is kind of propose these ideas to clients to say, this is how you figure out what is really driving you. Like, you've heard the question, what are your values? But I want to kind of demystify how to actually discover them and figure them out. And then once you've done that, it's like suddenly being a puzzle piece that fits.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever felt in conflict with anything in your life, it's quite amazing how it can come back to discovering what your values are. And then you're like, oh my gosh, now I know why that bothered me so much. Now I know why that argument, I can't get over that argument. Now I know why the guy at the gas station bothered me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever situation it was that caused you to feel that conflict goes back to really who you are. And those are all value based.
First of all, spot on, right? Like when I first truly understood values, a lot of things made sense to me. Like that icky feeling that I would get when somebody crossed one of my core values. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's why that hurts. And I think it's also really important to dive in and educate people on the fact that there's two types of values. There's our core values, which are really spiritual, authentic. Who are we at our core? Like we were born with some values and they've been shaped over the course of our life, but those are your core values. Those are innate to who you are.
Yes.
Then there's fear based values, which are usually formed by society and how we were brought up, and those values typically you're motivated because you don't want something else to happen. So core values is living your authentic self, living true to yourself, and fear-based values are I need to make a lot of money because otherwise XYZ is going to happen to me and that's bad.
Right. So if people think that, they're working hard, right? They're hard workers, they're loyal workers. They think like, well, that's a value. I'm a really hard worker. And it might be. And it's not to say that it's bad. There's no good or bad per se, but that value may be coming from a fear of not having money or a fear of not being viewed as being accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of value, you're exactly right. It's different than like that conscious, like I sometimes call them your die on a hill value, right? What is it that makes you innately you that nobody could change your mind about? Nobody can take that away from you. And you and I in this podcast are trying to shed some light on the difference between the values that make you you and the other quote unquote values that you think they are values because you've just grown up with that term through your life, but really that's just you being a good person or being a responsible person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think shedding some light on the difference to really get people to think about it and go within, that's kind of where the magic happens.
Yeah, and I absolutely love your die on a hill analogy. I'm a huge Brene Brown junkie.
Okay.
So for those who are Brene Brown junkies, it's also what keeps you in the arena. So,
Oh, I've heard that. Yes.
right? It's like we've all, I would think at this point, Brene Brown is like, whew, fangirling right now. But it's Teddy Roosevelt's quote. It's not the critic who counts. It's the one in the arena who's covered with blood, sweat, tears, who's really fighting to the end. And it's the one in the arena that matters.
Oh my God, yes.
And it's the one in the arena that is fighting for their values. Because when you have these core values that are so innate to you,
Yes.
nothing will change your mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like nothing will change your mind and nothing will take them away from you.
Right. It's part of who makes you you. I have brown eyes. Nobody's taking that from me. Right? It's like, that is just part of what makes me me. And these values are values that you're born with. Like you said before, they've been molded kind of throughout your life, but you can find them. And when you connect to them, it's really like finding yourself and being like, oh, I'm home.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's crazy is we've all lived with what we thought were our values. And right now, when you look at this pandemic and you look at the fact that a lot of people have been forced to stay at home, be with their families, a lot of people's jobs have been impacted. The busy has been taken away. Like we're no longer able to hide behind endless happy hours, sporting events,
Yeah.
child play dates. We can't hide behind the busy anymore. And we're being forced to come face to face with what are our values. And we're being forced to choose between the rat race
Mhm.
and doing stuff that matters. And it's icky. It's really icky because,
Yeah.
well, what do I value? Do I value my job or
Mhm.
do I value teaching my child? I don't know what to prioritize here.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I kind of want to point this out because I don't have the answer to this, right? But when you say, do I value my job or do I value teaching my child? It almost makes it sound like it's one or the other. But there could be a value in there that kind of connects both. And that's what you and I are kind of trying to talk about. That there's another layer that's a little bit
Mhm.
below that of, figure out at the end of the day, like what is it that might connect both of those things for you? You're talking about the rat race. And I was just thinking about this yesterday. I was having a conversation with my neighbor, and inevitably the conversation went to the anxiety that's behind not knowing what the future is. It just kind of made me think about in that moment, we value knowing things, right? We value being able to kind of have a look at what our future holds, right? We have some plans. I hate to use the term take it for granted because I don't mean it in a negative way. I just kind of mean it in a literal way that we're being faced with the situation where we're recognizing that we don't get to plan right now. So you got to come up with something else. And I had sort of said to her in that moment, well, think about it. If you really think about 2 months ago, your future wasn't promised to you then either. And even if it were, the future you thought you would have is clearly not what you got. And yet you are surviving it. And I know this may sound a little bit off topic. I know that you know that it's not, because it kind of comes back down to looking inward. But it was an aha moment for her. And I think, just to expand on that for 1 second, our life is lived around what we do, right? And to go back to the webinars that you and I are in, and Sandro for Micah, he had said, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And we are being forced to be right now. And I think that that's really valuable.
Yeah.
I think that that's, and that's why I love the idea of this podcast, is if you and I can, again, with the demystify, I have to come up with another word. If we can work on that, it's not that hard. And you have the time and space to start thinking about it now.
Yeah. And I think what's so powerful about that interaction that you had with your neighbor is we do value knowing things. We value certainty because certainty is safe. But unfortunately, when we value planning and we're always looking to the future, it takes us out of living in the present.
Yeah.
And values really help you live in the present, and they guide our lives in the here and now. And it really is about the being, because if we're doing without understanding our purpose and without understanding why we're here and how to be, then doing becomes a waste of time and life becomes a waste of time. So, why are you here? What is your purpose for why you do what you do? And yes, the world has kind of come to a pause. In the light of planning and being planners, that's what innately we do. We look to the future, is how can we cultivate something now so when we walk out of this pandemic, we're stronger and we don't get thrown back in the rat race and everything we've learned about ourselves is just a complete loss.
Oh my gosh, exactly. There are plenty of people that have done this self-development. And so I feel like this message is landing on those ears. And then you've got people that are maybe new to this that now have the time, and they're maybe finding this podcast or finding other videos. And I think this is a really, really important message to get out to those of us who don't know how to be resilient or have never had to think about it before. Let's say this. We say we're being forced, right? But you and I know that we always have a choice, right? So you may not feel forced. You might be in your home just spending the time binge watching Netflix and eating whatever, which, side note, would be completely fine. I do that quite often.
I'm
But,
really upset that I ran out of Girl Scout cookies. I'm not sure.
right?
I have one bottle of wine left and not enough cookies in the house, and I'm just at a complete loss.
Right. Like, let me just put out there to you that I am not all sitting Indian style Zen, not binge watching Netflix and learning to be resilient. But the point that I'm making is that you are being given a gift, right? If you can kind of shift the narrative and look at this as, you always have that choice. And I don't want this to sound harsh, because I don't judge anyone with how they're coping with this and how they're feeling with this. This is new. This is scary. But you do have the choice to pull the covers up to your chin and cower in bed and just wait for it to be over. Or you can make the choice to make the best of the time that you have, right? So we say that we're kind of being forced to take a look inward. And I think that you make a really good point about, work on it now. Figure out what moves you now. You could, when the world decides to open up, you could walk out that door really being a completely different person than you were when this all started. You have time to find yourself. You have time to really grow. Listen, we're all going to grow from this no matter what.
Yeah. And there was a tweet that was circling that basically said, if you don't walk out of this pandemic without a new skill or a new hobby or blah, 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 you lack discipline. And a lot of people are hating on that tweet. And I would agree. Like, it's a pandemic. You don't need to lose 50 pounds or learn a new skill.
Right.
But I think the point is this is an opportunity to learn and grow, period. We
Yes.
are being forced to learn about ourselves and to come at life a different way. And right before this episode, I was taking time to journal and reflect on my own values. And two of my biggest values are connection and freedom. And from the outside looking in, it's impossible to fulfill those right now. Like connection, I'm safe at home, aka stuck at home, but I'm safe at home with my husband and my dog, whom I love dearly, but let's be honest, I don't need to connect with them 24/7. So connection is tough, and freedom. Everything I used to do to cultivate that freedom is now gone. So, that took a hit initially, and I was actually really angry. I took a couple live yoga classes and it made me angry because I wasn't in the studio. I had a ton of Zoom happy hours, and those were great because I saw people, but it was still not fulfilling. And I was really upset that my values were taken away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was journaling right before this, I kind of had an aha moment that my values can't be taken away from me. They are who I am at my core.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to me to find a way to fulfill them. So rather than approaching my values with catabolic energy and being really grumpy and upset that I can't fulfill them the way that I used to fulfill them, I all of a sudden had that, whew, hold on, Jenn.
Uh-huh.
This is who you are at your core. You want to connect and you want to be free. Okay, how can I fulfill that now? And like for me, that simple reframe was like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. And even though I'm not in person, connection is still connection. And being safe at home, talk about level 6 energy, right? Like I am a piece of the bigger puzzle. And by being safe in my house, I am connected to everybody else in my community who is also safe in their house, keeping the broader community safe.
Ooh, I love that
Right? Like
too.
we are all in this together. And that if that doesn't bring a sense of connection, then I am looking in the wrong place and I am ignoring my core values. And then just, the freedom piece, to your point, everything's a choice. So I have the choice to control my actions, control my energy. And as you know, one of the iPEC Foundation principles is the greatest freedom is the freedom of choice. And we have that right now.
All the time.
All the time. So I'm really curious before we dive in and start talking about how people can go about finding their values, what are some of your values and how have you figured out how to reprioritize them during this pandemic?
So that's a great question. And I also just want to say I love that you, before you ask that question, you did the whole conscious choice. We always have a choice. That's our greatest freedom. Because I wanted to point out to you that you exhibited making the choice when you just gave your example of realizing that your values weren't really happening the way that you want them to, and you were feeling in conflict and angry about that. And you made a choice in that moment to try to figure out how you could control them. So you're always making choices and you're always in control of that. And I always just kind of like to foster that message through these two. So I saw you do it and I wanted to point it out because it was a great example.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It was very empowering to all of a sudden stand in my own power, a resilience, but all of a sudden realize like, oh crap, like this isn't the pandemic that's taking these away from me. It's me that's taking these away from me right now. And I have the choice to put them back.
Yes. I know, Scott. I love that though. That's really, really, that's a very, very important and profound message. So our values are quite similar. I also have a very high value of freedom and also connection. Connection, I would say connection, if I had to number them, connection is probably my highest. My second highest is probably honesty, and then freedom. It's interesting though, and I might look into this later and try to maybe figure this out just because I find it interesting. I haven't felt threatened with the freedom thing, even though we kind of have no freedom. So I don't know why that is, except to say my life has led me to learn to be resilient early. And I think that that skill may just have something to do with my mindset during all of this right now. So there's a thing there that I will probably look into later. For me, connection is key. Knowing that we are having this happen in our age of, social media has been something interesting for me to focus on. I have young kids and hate social media. I think it can be great and it can really serve its purpose. But as a parent, like if they cut down social media tomorrow, side note, if we weren't having this pandemic right now and stuck in our homes, I would have been perfectly okay with it because it would just help me parent more easily. It's just kind of been the bane of my existence. Flash forward to this, and I don't know that I could be more thankful and grateful. And I find that interesting because it has helped me see this negative thing that I've looked at for the last couple of years. And suddenly I'm grateful for this thing that I didn't really love. And I think that's interesting. But connection for me, I love that I can see pictures, and I love that we have Zoom, and I love that we can talk on the phone. I love that we can create this podcast and still do it, and not be able to do it. I am struggling without having physical connection. It's hard for me not to hug my friends.
Mm-hmm.
The virus has affected me personally. My father-in-law is in a nursing home and just had it and got over it. Thank God.
Oh, good.
Yes. But knowing that we could potentially not be there for him, not hold his hand, God forbid the worst happens. So that's a real thing, by the way, that people are struggling with now, that their loved ones go into the hospital and they can't go with them. And being a person that values connection so much, like it really hurts my heart. I can physically feel the chest pains even talking about that. Yet another reason why building resilience is so important personally.
Right.
So connection I've been okay with. Honesty, I would say, what I have found about this is that I've opened space for people to be honest about their feelings about it. I have friends that are total conspiracy theorists, like I have to just I just hold space for them. And it's like, I want them to be honest. I want them to kind of get out whatever it is they're feeling. Like that's just their way of coping. I think I've allowed myself to be a little more honest too. We're life coaches, but we're human before anything else. And if I'm having a crap day and my head isn't right, I'm going to be honest about that too. So there's been maybe a little bit more of that over the last month. So I would say that that's probably how I see my values coming into play right now.
And I think what's so spot on about that is where you were just saying about holding space for people to be honest and to be themselves. And one really powerful thing about truly understanding what your values are is that you can then communicate your values. And it's easier for you to hold space for other people because you're able to go in with non-judgment. So rather than having this series of monologues where it's like, hey, Lauren, I'm going to talk about my value and what's important to me for a minute. And then you're going to talk about what's important to you for a minute. And I'm just going to tune out and look at the clock and wait for me to then jump in.
Yes.
Values really allow you to give that space and be open with each other.
You are really hitting a nail on the head here. Just in intimate relationships, absolutely, right? But in any interpersonal relationships, when you've done some work and you have figured out what your values are, you open up the ability to communicate with any other person on two different levels that weren't there before. The first one is understanding your own reactions and understanding how you might communicate a little bit better based on who you are at the core. And the other part is if you take the time, if you really care about someone, if this is someone in your immediate circle or even someone that you work with, if you take the time to learn that person's values and truly understand what makes them tick and why, conversations are deeper. Your understanding is deeper. Your connection is deeper. And I'm not saying that you have to fall in love with a coworker that you hate. I'm saying it's as much self-serving And there's just overall less conflict when you're willing to do that, when you're willing to learn about the people that you're talking to.
And how level 5 is that, right? That win-win scenario, and even level 6 with the connection.
Absolutely.
When you're in it and you can listen and receive, and it truly becomes a win-win because you can start cultivating these deeper relationships and conversations and understanding where are they coming from. And for those people who are listening that are very close to me, you know that one of my mantras is what people say and do is about them,
Mm-hmm.
and how we react and respond is about us.
1,000%.
And how we react and respond are our values. So if we get angry or feel crossed,
Yes.
one of our values is crossed. So we can easily point the finger and be like, oh, well, so and so sent me a nasty email. And this actually happened to me. I had somebody send me an email and it hurt. They told me I was selfish and self-serving, and it really hurt. And I all of a sudden took a step back and said, wait a minute, whatever she said is what she said, but why is that bothering me at its core?
Mm.
Not that it was a mean thing to say, but what is it at my core? And it's what value was being crossed. And it was my value of wanting to give and be authentic and help people. So for someone to think that I wasn't doing that was like, ugh, knife to the throat.
Absolutely. Literally, it's same situation. And I want to also say and think about, right? You and I, 3 years ago, how might these examples, and I'm going to give mine in a second, but how might we might still be, if we want to talk about levels, we'd be all level 1, right? For like probably a couple of weeks over it. And knowing our own values, we were able to take that step back and think about and ask that question. The first time I had a situation that just knocked me off my boots, and I was so frustrated. And I put it out in a private group of coaches and literally was like, coaches, help me. I feel like I'm a smart woman and I should be able to get over this, but I totally can't. And one of the coaches, and there were like 39 comments, right? One of the coaches was like, what value of yours is being threatened? And I was like, my first response was, who the hell are you? And then within a millisecond, I was like, oh my God, you are right. And so that is not a weapon. That is a superhero power for you to have in your toolbox to be able to ask yourself that question.
Yeah. And you and I could talk about this forever, but I think you just nailed it, right? It is, if you understand what your values are and you start to feel yourself drop into that catabolic conflict, that didn't feel good, the ability to stop and say what value is being crossed will teach you so much more about who you are and allow you to grow and shift back up into a higher energy level that really allows you to then approach it with a clear mind and say, okay, that happened, rather than staying in conflict. Where's the opportunity? How can I be the bigger person here?
What can I learn from this?
What can I learn from this? Spot on. So I do want to give people tools to help them discover what their own values are. I have a couple that I personally use with my clients, and I would love to hear what you use with your clients if you have any others.
Sure.
So my first tip is, at a very basic level, just write everything down that's important to you. So you can start pretty high level. Like Lauren, you said earlier, if family is important to you, write down family. But I would also challenge you, once you start to get into the flow, write about why things are important to you. So family is important to me because of love, support, honesty. For me, freedom is important to me because it releases societal pressures and allows me to be my authentic self. Freedom allows me to just go do what I want to do without needing to feel responsible. So that's definitely tip number 1. Write a list of everything that's important to you. And I don't care how long it is, just start writing. The second thing that I think people can do, and I've seen this work for my clients, is start to raise awareness around the things that you prioritize and start to understand why you're prioritizing them. So, what do I want to do? What do I choose to do? And why is that important to me? Right now, we're being forced to prioritize. We're being forced to prioritize our safety, our jobs, You might even have to be prioritizing devices. If you typically work, but your kid needs your computer, how do you prioritize that? And what does that say about you and your values? And then the last thing that I always recommend people do is take a values assessment. There's a bunch of free ones online. I have one on my website as well, but taking a values assessment or working with a coach can help you start to understand, are you living in alignment with those values? And that's really powerful because it's one thing to know your values. It's another thing to take time to understand, am I living true to this value or am I prioritizing something else? So, what else have you used in the past to help people?
So that values assessment, when I'm really just starting to work with someone and this is kind of a new concept to them, I really like the values assessment. And I have a little trick, which they love and hate me for at the same time when I have them do it. But really what it is you, in the values assessment that I do, it kind of lists a bunch of things and you can always add in anything that you might not see on there. But I like to have them look and pick 10. And that's kind of easy to do. You know, if you have a list of 50 things, you kind of go through and you pick and whatever, and you pick the 10, and then I kind of have them weed them down. All right, now you've picked 10. Now I want you to pick 6 out of those 10. All right, cross off 4 of them. I want you to cross off 4 more. And you're left with like your top 2 values. I actually love watching people do this. And almost 100% of the time, family is on there as a value, right? And nobody feels comfortable crossing that off because it feels icky. You're like, oh my God, but I love my family. I know you love your family. Your core values allow you to be a good person and continue to love your family, even if family is not your core value. And I just think it's so powerful for people to kind of realize, oh my God, like you're right. This comes from a deeper place. So I do love a good values assessment. And talking about, the whole die on a hill phrase, I really try to get into their heads a little bit and just say, and this is once you know a client, you've got a little bit of insight, as coaches, we're working with them. We are on the journey with them. We're walking side by side and we get to know them. And so we can kind of point out some insights that they don't always see themselves. And I will give the question, what are you not willing to compromise? And so that question can be pretty powerful in and of itself.
That's so devilish of you with that values assessment. I was just, as you were telling that story, I was thinking about when I took my first values assessment. I think it was the same thing. There were like 50 things on the page, and I think I circled 39 of them.
Yes.
I was like, all of these are important.
Yes. Yeah. And now everybody knows my trick and nobody's ever going to want me to do it to them, but that's okay.
It's fine because you need that. You need that thought process of, let me start with 39.
Yes.
And I have now got it down to 2, right? Connection and freedom. If I can have that, I don't really care what else happens in my life.
Exactly.
As long as I can connect with people and I have the freedom to live the life the way I want to live it.
Yes.
Lauren, this has been great. We are at the end of our time together, unfortunately. Before we cut it for the day, what is one piece of advice that you have for anyone that wants to live a life that is in alignment to their core values or a life of resilience?
It's super easy. Regarding living in alignment with your values, follow your gut. Get in tune with what your gut is telling you. I will tell my kids until the day I die that when you are faced with something where you have to make a decision from your head, your heart, or your stomach, follow your stomach 100% of the time. And I think that that's just a really good place to start. You know what I'm talking about because you can feel it in your gut when something doesn't feel 100% right. And if you start listening to that voice, it will help you.
I think that's huge. And that really taps into that holographic thinking, which is that sweet spot with your head, heart, and gut.
Yep.
And most of us either think with our heart or we think with our head. And 90% of the people out there ignore their gut.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right that if you listen to that gut and you start to get an icky feeling, one of your values is probably being crossed.
Yes.
And you're being asked to do something that's not in alignment with who you are at your authentic core.
Yes.
That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
For everyone that's listening right now, at the bare minimum, if you don't want to do any of those tips, tricks, anything that Lauren and I suggested, I ask you to just pause and ask yourself, who do you want to be when this pandemic is over? Not what do you want to do? where do you want to go? What talent do you want to share? But who do you want to be? And start living a life that will allow you to be that person that you choose to be.
So good.
That was episode 9 of the Conshy Coaching Podcast. If you'd like to connect with Lauren Pla, I have included her website in the episode notes. If you would like to learn more about cultivating resilience and to download workbooks to support your journey to self-discovery, please check out my website at conshycoaching.com. As always, if you like learning about mindset and energy leadership coaching, please subscribe to my channel and join my weekly email list so that you never miss an episode or a blog post. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day.